Hi, everyone. Welcome to all of you. I see people joining this webinar now, 25 people, 30 people. So we are really delighted to see so many of you today, so sharing the belief that the circular economy has a real role to play in the food and the hospitality industry. So we have people registered from all around the UK, London, Edinburgh, Brighton, Durham, and all around the world as well. So we have people signed up from Bogota, Georgetown, Shanghai, Delhi, and Barcelona. So that's really great to see this interest from all around the world. We are going to start with a poll, just as people are joining, to see who is in the room, and yes, so we're going to launch this poll now. And a bit of housekeeping rules while you're answering the poll. So we are recording this session. We'll share the link shortly after the event. We'll try to answer all the questions during the session, so you can just ask your question in the Q&A chat box of the Zoom platform. And for all the questions we can't answer during this webinar, we'll send a document with all the answers afterwards. Just a quick note, we won't be monitoring the question in the general chat box, so please put your question directly in the Q&A. So you have 65 coming and more joining. But we are really delighted to present you today our circular economy guides, so food that doesn't cost the earth. So we launched really recently on Monday during the Ellen MacArthur Foundation Big Food Workshop. And the guide was developed by the London Waste and Recycling Board's Advanced London team in collaboration with the Sustainable Restaurant Association. And it provides food businesses with practical circular economy measures to reduce the impact on the environment, but at the same time give a boost to the bottom line. And although this guide has been written before the COVID-19 crisis that has obviously critically hit this sector, we believe that the content in it is more than ever relevant. As the world starts to reopen post-COVID-19, there's a great opportunity to change things and to redesign, so to reopen right, build back better, so we'll have more resilient food business and with a lesser impact on the environment. And this guide has been a truly collaborative effort with more than 30 people involved in the creation of the guide and several expert organizations, so to name a few, RAP helped us in this, Carbon Trust, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and obviously the Sustainable Restaurant Association. So let's look at the result of the poll now to see we have in the room. Some majority of restaurants, cafe, caterer, and other food businesses, a few sustainability organizations, consultancy, academics, and research students a bit. So in terms of knowledge, so most of the people say that have average knowledge on the circular economy. And again, for the level of circularity of the food business, we have an average of 3, which is good. It means that there is some space to improve. And 17% said that not at all circular. So during the session, we will give a short presentation of the guide, and then we'll move into a panel session and then a Q&A, so we'll have an opportunity to ask questions to the panelists. And without further ado, I'm handing over to Natalia, the head of the Advanced London team, for the presentation of the guide. Thank you.
Good morning. Hi, thank you, Jean. Welcome all to the virtual space of the London Waste and Recycling Board. And I am echoing the enthusiasm of Jean. I'm really proud to be sharing with you this guide today. We have been working hard for a year now on this with all our partners. we thought of sharing with you the what, why, and how behind this guide. Why we put it together, what is a circular business, why it's important, and how you can do it, and give you a quick run through the guide so you can be more familiar with it when you actually use it and download it. A little bit of context, just in London alone, we have around 40,000 hospitality and food service businesses, 40,000 businesses that cater to our daily dietary needs. And that was a really alarming sign for us that we should do something to help those businesses be on the same trajectory as us. That on the circular economy trajectory that we are trying to bring our city along. Bear with me, I'm gonna share my screen with you and switch to our presentation so you can have a visual image behind what I'm saying. So hopefully you can all see my screen with the avocado, tomato, and bread on it. The first most important element in this discussion that we've had to kind of overcome with the team was, okay, what it means to be a circular business. And we spent a lot of time thinking and rethinking about it, trying to explain it in a way that it's consistent, simple to understand, but also doesn't miss out on all the nice intel that we had. So the first thing that you will see in the guide is about what it means to be a circular business. And we try to bring it down to 5 simple principles. First of all, try to buy less. As a business, you are daily supplying, having suppliers and sourcing materials for your meals, for your operations. So is there any way to buy less of those? And is there any way to buy in a smarter way? Can they be materials that they are surplus materials of other businesses that you can use in your operations, for instance? Then another principle is looking at how you use those materials and those resources once they come into your kitchens or once they come into your spaces. Can you use them more efficiently, more effectively? At this point, it's very important to stress that we are also looking at water and energy usage, because those are also very valuable resources that the hospitality and food industry is actually using much daily. Then looking at what comes out of your businesses and your operations. Is there any way to throw less? Can you minimize the amount of waste that you're generating by repurposing those ingredients, those materials that they are at the end of their life? Or is there any way to throw in a smarter way? And you can dive into all our suggestions on how you can do that better. This is it might sound simplistic, but we explicitly try to bring it down to earth and with a simple language to convey the messages we needed in order for businesses to understand that it's not just for minimizing resources that you're using during your operations, but it's also looking at what comes in, what goes out, and where does it go. In principle, the vision is to have businesses where resources stay in circulation for as long as possible at their highest value. This is the core message of any circular business discussion, how businesses keep resources in circulation for as long as possible at their highest value. Now, why is this all very important? And I am sure, and looking at the nature of our audience on the basis of the poll, that most of you are aware of the negative impacts of our unsustainable food systems. So I'm not going to dive into all the details and the numbers. They're all available in the guide. But we just wanted to highlight and emphasize and remind ourselves of the 4 key elements of the impact of our unsustainable food systems. Air pollution, methane related to the agricultural side, the transportation, that is the transportation impact of our food supply chains, water depletion, all the chemicals that go into the food production, and all the processing that goes after nutrients loss. Every time we throw away anything that is of an organic nature into our waste bin, we are losing nutrients that they should have been going back to our soils. And then all of that is a really costly, has a really costly effect on businesses and on the whole actually supply chain. So just to give you a figure, we have calculated that businesses on average could be saving around £6,000 per year by preventing perfectly edible food from being thrown away in the bin. And just out of fun, we did calculate that and extrapolate that to our city. So if all London food businesses were actually trying to divert the perfectly edible food from their bins, this could actually result to 240 million pounds each year saved by reducing food waste. So that's a huge impact, both on the environmental but also on the financial bottom line. And actually what we're saying is, by being a circular business, and we are not just saying that me, Jean, and the London Waste and Recycling Board, but like all the 15 real life cases that are included in the guide are actually demonstrating that there is another way to do it. And there is a way to restore our ozone layers. There is a way to have and maintain clean water systems. There is a way to have healthy soils and booming businesses through doing this in a circular way. How are we going to do this and how we suggest you do it? We try to think as restaurants, we try to think as catering businesses, we try to think as food businesses. And we thought that there are 7 key ingredients that you come across in most of your businesses, hopefully. And if we have missed anything, please feel free to let us know. But we thought that these 7 key ingredients are the most frequently met in every food business. So what we did is like look at these 7 ingredients and try to give specific advice on each of these areas. So we have food and drink, energy that is used, water, packaging, facilities management, consumables, and transportation. And I'm gonna click around so you can see how you could also navigate through the guide. So if we could look at the food and drink section, then we have put together a sort of checklist for you to decide and have a little bit of a route map of what you could be doing when it comes to food and drink. You could be designing menus in a different way. You can reduce your meat products on the guide. We have an amazing well, there are popping up a lot of examples, but there's an amazing story with the Rubak, a really nice pub here in London that has launched their burger that has completely reduced the amount of meat that is in the burger, and it's a big success. So they are inspiring stories. Sourcing ingredients, how can you reuse surplus ingredients instead of buying directly raw ingredients, etc., etc. You can go back to the directory. If you go to the packaging section, for example, you can see that we have the similar checklist at the beginning of each chapter, and then you can read and go to the following pages and get additional resources and examples. I will not play with this anymore, even though it's very tempting. I will just want to just show you that there is a lot of content behind every single page. We have around 15 case studies, real case studies, a lot of takeaway messages, and we hope that this will inspire you to act as well and aim for becoming a circular business. I think we are looking for feedback. Don't hesitate to share the feedback with our team. You can download the guide for free, and I think our tech support will share the links on where you can download the guide on the chat. And Jean, back to you for our inspiring panel discussion and see how we can link what we are suggesting in the guide with the current situation and how these principles can be used to build back better also in the food sector.
Great, thank you so much, Natalia. So we are really lucky to have 3 brilliant panelists joining us today. So we have Andrew Stephens, the CEO of the Sustainable Restaurant Association, will tell us about the impact of COVID on the restaurant industry and giving tips to reopen rights. We'll have Arthur Potts-Dawson, a chef, but also a pioneer in the sustainability in the restaurant industry and an active member of the Chef Manifesto, or give it his unique experience and knowledge on the topic. And we also have Grace Regan, founder of Spicebox, will tell us about the reusable container scheme that they have set up a year ago. So we'll start with Andrew. So Andrew, can you please introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, hi everyone. Good morning. My name's Andrew. As Jean said, I run the Sustainable Restaurant Association, which is a not-for-profit member organisation based in the UK, but active in about 6 or 7 countries around the world. What we try to do is to help food service businesses address the climate emergency and social inequality, and do so together.
Great, thanks. I'd like to ask you, why did you decide to partner with us on the development of this guide? So now it was 6 months ago, so what was the trigger? And what do you think has changed since the COVID crisis, and how circular economy is still relevant in this climate?
Sure, thanks. Well, as you can see, Jean's quite an intimidating character. So when he asks you to partner, you just do what he says. He looks like that holograph in real life too. I guess, you know, it was 6 months ago that we first started thinking and talking about this. And even before Corona times, running a food business sustainably is hard. And we think that circular economy offers quite a good way in, and some quite sort of like aligned win-wins for businesses, or, you know, good ways for, I guess, environmentally minded people to convince financially minded people that this is worth fighting for. So, you know, very simply, kind of buy less, buy smart, use more, throw less, throw smart, is a good sort of kind of way of thinking about restaurants agency and what they can do. I saw on the poll that, you know, we've got a number of people that claim to know more than nothing about circular economy here, so probably not much point going into the details. But you know, the food system is a super important, I guess, change maker for biodiversity, health, and the climate emergency. And so, you know, everything we do at the SRA is about trying to accelerate change. I've personally been involved in circular economy stuff for about 10 years. I used to work with Accenture Strategy with their kind of circular awards in Davos, and saw kind of firsthand how really big businesses that are kind of highly integrated value chains are using this language. And more recently, I was involved in consulting with Ellen MacArthur on, I guess, their framework for kind of city-based action on circular economy and for food. And I think it's just really interesting where that ended up, you know, in that how Ellen MacArthur are framing it is that, you know, the 3 key actions for a more circular food system are sourcing food grown regeneratively and locally where appropriate, designing and marketing healthier food products, and making the most of food. And, you know, they're all things that restaurants and chefs have got a ton of agency and a ton of impact on. So, yeah, that's kind of why we got involved in the guide. Do you want me to talk about what's changed as well? Or do you want to park that for later?
It looks like we've lost Jean, so why don't you talk about that? That'd be great.
Sure. Okay, cool. So I think he was offended, wasn't he, by my hologram comment? Hopefully he forgives
like.
So, you know, in terms of what's changed, obviously anyone that runs a restaurant business doesn't need me kind of caterwauling about the challenges of coronavirus. I guess what we're seeing is that, you know, on the one hand, the kind of agency of restaurants has been really challenged and really squeezed. You know, local and regenerative might mean more time, more money, more demands on cash flow. So, you know, there's certain bits of embodying this that are a bit more challenging right now. But I guess on the flip side, there is a real opportunity that comes from this crisis if you can survive it as a food business. You know, when we talk to our members, I think only 4% are planning not to change the menu or not to engage with a different supply chain. maybe because you haven't paid your old ones, or maybe because you're trying to improve things. So, there's an almost unprecedented opportunity to kind of reopen right, as we call it. And I think the kind of practicality of this guide, I'd really encourage, you to treat it as a challenge and look at how many of the kind of tick boxes you can do on reopening. I think, particularly, the really immediate challenge we face about, in the UK at least, and in a number of other countries, reopening your restaurant in an environment where there's still quite a lot of fear of going out, and where safety is going to be really paramount in people's minds. It's likely that it's going to be increasingly challenging to, I guess, make the most of food, shall we say. There's probably going to be more food waste created where there's demand uncertainty, and there's probably going to be more packaging and single use used where people kind of perceive that as being a more safe way to go. It's never mattered more that you think about, I guess, the end of life and creating the right infrastructure to, redistribute food and to make sure that waste goes in the right place. So I think on one hand, there's certain elements of the guide that have got significantly tighter financial constraints around, but I think the core messaging and structure is more relevant than it's ever been.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we have a lot of interest from the audience as well on the COVID situation and how the new measures will actually, like the new hygiene measures and the social distancing rules will impact the feasibility of some of the measures that we present in the guide. How do you see that? Can you share some thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, I'm sure Arthur and Grace have got kind of, again, maybe more practical and grounded thoughts on this than myself. But I think producing zero food waste probably got tougher. So make sure that you're thinking about redistribution and using, both charitable and other opportunities to kind of resell what would be food waste and avoiding it. I think some of the CapEx investments about kind of old and efficient equipment are probably going to go on the back burner for a while. I think businesses might want to be smart and try and look at what funding is available from BEIS or maybe even their landlord to sort of get that done without laying out cash. And I think a key one is that, in terms of sourcing and ingredients grown regeneratively, I think, there's considerable evidence that diners on return are going to be motivated by higher levels of transparency, provenance, and the idea of supporting local. However, most small-scale local suppliers don't give you very good payment terms.
Yeah.
And if you're a restaurant that's been underwater for 3-4 months, kind of reopening with kind of on fumes, it's going to be very tempting to dip into an industrial food system that will allow you to pay on 60 or 90 days.
Yeah.
So I think there are some sort of quite specific challenges that require a bit of creativity to overcome. And I guess anything cash flow intensive, it's important to be realistic about the kind of limitations on that right now.
Yeah.
I guess lastly, just to mention kind of, reusable packaging. I think this is a bit of a rabbit hole. It's certainly the case that elements of the plastics industry, if you want to call it that, have been pushing quite hard about the opportunity for better hygiene from single use. I think there are probably environments in which single use is going to better satisfy customers' safety demands. But there are also some really interesting examples, people like Boston Tea Party and Costa doing contactless coffee with reusable cups. So I think, moving to reusable is going to be, I guess, sort of in some cases quite challenging.
Okay. I am tempted to ask you many more questions. I think we have a poll which relates a little bit to the COVID situation. I don't know if our tech host can help us with putting up the poll just to get a feeling of what the audience thinks and if there are any restaurants and food businesses in the audience which are. It would be really helpful to see if they are planning to reopen soon, and what are the biggest areas of concern with a reopen. So, and how sustainability is part of those reopening plans. I think the purpose of this discussion is to highlight how you can build back better, regardless of the constraints, right, Andrew? There are indeed a lot, but there are opportunities. Like we have seen a massive community impact. Communities, even people in their own buildings, they start talking to each other. I don't know, in bigger cities that's not a given, so we see that happening more and more. And sharing foods, leftover food from one apartment is actually, we have a small sharing spot at our building, and then helping each other while sharing resources and not letting them go into the bin as they would have gone. Are we ready to share the results for the poll, or shall we go to our next? Oh, we are, yes. Oh, so here we are. So yes, everybody, the majority of our participants are planning to reopen, which is really promising and good. What is your biggest areas of concern? Lack of customers and financial insecurity is the prevailing reason. Operations, logistics, maintaining physical distancing come as also as concerns. Staff retention and well-being also there, but not as biggest concern. And then when you reopen, how will sustainability feature in your plans? We are aiming to improve our sustainability. That is fantastic news to hear. I hope you do commit to those ambitious plans, and we are aiming to maintain where we were doing what we were doing before. That's also really, really good. And we think of sustainability, of our sustainability efforts will decline. Luckily, that's not the majority. Excellent. So I think we have a good feel from our audience that we are reopening. We want to reopen in a better way. Arthur, maybe we come to you, and maybe you can introduce yourself and share some thoughts on how that building opening back better could happen. The floor is yours, Arthur.
Thank you, Natalia. Hello, my name is Arthur Boxton. I'm the executive chef at On Bed Gardens, which is a food project in North London. Also one of the more senior chefs inside the Chef's Manifesto, only because of my length of time inside being involved rather than being senior. It's great to be here, to be able to listen to all of the opinions, certainly from Andrew and from Grace. I'm also really excited to see this document, or sorry, this sort of 60 pages around food that doesn't cost the earth. That's something that I've been working on now for nearly 15 years. I've been a chef for 35 years, and in my training, I was trained classically around how to cook Michelin-star food. And it's funny because back in the late 80s, everything was about the economy of food. And I was taught about the economy of food by Albert Roux, and 20 years later, Albert Roux's shadow still remained over me, and the economy became the ecology of the kitchen, meaning that everything was switched off when not being used, or lower your water capacity, get more localized food systems in place, etc. And sort of fast forward through 15 years of sustainable food, it's been a journey which has seen food just end up in black bins alongside fag butts and coffee grounds into cities and towns and villages too, where food has become a much bigger priority around waste and energy consumption and the relationship between suppliers. And in all of that, my role has sort of extended into the United Nations World Food Programme, and as an advocacy chef, I'm working with the UN on looking at how to communicate really as a chef to the general public the issues that are faced on a planetary scale around famine, pestilence, war, and what food does and how food is used as a tool for both peace and war. And so as chefs, we have quite a voice. And in all of that, my role as a chef inside the Chef's Manifesto has been to really begin to understand how, as chefs, we're positioned really nicely to communicate the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals, for those of you who don't know what they are, they're 17 goals created by 194 countries around the world on how best to build sustainability into government policy, into local policy, into businesses, NGOs, etc. And quite a lot of the time, chefs were sort of always wanting to look at sustainability. And Andrew, you know this, so many businesses and chefs understand the importance of, you know, food, health, freshness, locality, how to tread more lightly as a human on the planet, how food doesn't cost the earth, and how we can eat it more healthily, and why it's better for our bodies. And all of that then generates soil health and understanding how our gut microbiome and nutrition is vital. So chefs have this really, really important role to play in communicating sustainability and the ethics and the holistic nature of food. And so the Chef's Manifesto is a way of getting the Sustainable Development Goals communicated very simply. We have 8 thematic areas inside the Chef's Manifesto, and those thematic areas look at, you know, ocean health, soil health, livelihoods, better understanding of the planet, etc. I won't go into all the thematic areas. It's simple, but you know, there's a lot to discuss. But what that does do is it gives a very simple tool to chefs to be able to communicate sustainability both from a local and global level. And sometimes chefs realize, well, I'm doing that already, and I'm doing that already, and I understand that I'm doing that, and therefore I can communicate this in a simpler way to both my customers, but I can also then collaborate and work with chefs all over the world. You know, I mean, I can't think how many countries we're in now. I think we're in at least 90 countries in Chef's Manifesto, where chefs are looking at taking the thematic areas and building into their businesses. Yeah. And so sustainability is an important aspect for chefs now. And they're joining organisations like the SRA and connecting into these documents that you're creating. I mean, I've been so excited about this circular economy document that you produced, and I've read through it, and I've been shouting about it because I think it's really, really positive, and it's something that can be used again as a tool because chefs are busy and they lead busy lives, and they need simple tools to be able to communicate to both their supply chain and their customers. Yeah. And so, you know, my role really is to help innovate and influence chefs all over the world, as well as cooking delicious food.
Very, very nice. Thank you. And how do you see, so you have been around for a long time, as you said, and you have achieved so many things in that front, and thank you for doing that. And we want you to keep doing that. How do you see the industry moving forward 15 years from now, let's say? So how do you see or you envision our system to look like? What's the aspirational food system you would like to see and you would like to be part of?
Yeah. Well, there's the aspirational, which is what I'd like it to be, and then there's the fear that I have that is that.
Give us the aspirational.
Aspirational. Well, aspirational. We really need to look at how we can, as chefs, connect food in the ground to the people who are eating it. And this needs to happen all over the world, in different countries, and in different cities, and in different rural areas, where if you really truly know where your food comes from, and that you are secure in your knowledge of knowing where your food is grown and how it gets to you, then we are a more food secure place locally, which then generates a much more global view and understanding of seasonality, of rainfall, of soil health. And so from a chef perspective, communicating is absolutely essential, and collaboration and understanding the fairness and the unfairness and the movement of food around the world, the migration of cultures and people, you know, food is really at the forefront of all of that. So from an aspirational point of view, I want to see chefs more and more connecting to their food suppliers and getting that food supply conversation fired up inside the consumer, because it's really the consumer that ultimately is going to make the decision on where they buy their food from, and whether they're going to be making demands of the big supermarkets, of the big food conglomerates, of the Monsantos and the buyers who are generating seeds and seed health and soil health. It's about chefs being able to leverage and communicate how to move forward into the future healthily and in more support of the planet.
Perfect. And so there are many restaurants that and we're going to come to the Q&A. I'm just a note for those who have asked some nice questions. We're going to come to the questions at the end of our discussion with the panelists, so don't be scared that we forgot about them. But like Arthur, I would like to ask you something around what advice can you give? What would you like to tell to the restaurants that they do see that it's important to be a sustainable or a circular and zero waste restaurant, but they do think that it's an expensive concept or difficult to implement? So what would you like to tell them, like maybe where they should start, how they should go about it?
Well, without being too evangelical, I think it's important that chefs and restaurants understand that they're at the forefront of the food system and discussions around what food should be. Mm-hmm. And so you talk about cheap food. I don't think there's no such thing as cheap food. Food, if you buy it for £1, there's going to be £9 worth of expense at one end. If you buy it for £10, then you're paying a fair price for it and supporting a smaller but more resilient food system that perhaps needs to move into the future. So cheap food is no such thing as cheap food. You're paying for it somewhere down the line. Yeah. And the problem is that we're paying for it in the future. So our children or our children's children will be paying for all of the cheap food that's being produced nowadays. So I think as restaurants that want to reopen with a new system of, okay, what didn't work? Did part of the food mechanics, the logistics, the distribution of food, did that break down because of the fact that people couldn't get into the fields, people couldn't pack it, people couldn't move it? Suddenly, food logistics and distribution becomes a massive issue. And so as restaurants and restaurant owners and chefs, we need to be saying to ourselves, okay, we need to be looking at a more resilient food system. And resilience really should be narrating sustainability, because resilience is about supporting and working with localized food systems. It's about supporting a producer who's producing milk locally, whether it's goat or sheep or cow, and looking at cheeses and supporting growers that sometimes have a glut in the summer or in the autumn, and how can chefs and businesses go to support them. So I think that the food chefs and restaurants has a huge responsibility for the health of the planet. So any restaurants that are reopening must be considering for the future what they do now, because what we build now can influence and change the way the food system works into the future over the next 15 years. So chefs and restaurants must take responsibility for the food systems.
And before we go, we move on to Grace. I would like to challenge you and pick two practical things you have implemented in your restaurants that you're really proud of and that they link to our discussion, either to the guide or to the wider sustainability agenda. The two things that you would tell your kids, I'm really proud, guys, because I did this today at the restaurant. So then you can inspire more people that it is not that difficult to do some small practical quick wins.
Oh, well, my main happiness wherever my food business is always about connecting to my local food system and talking to my local suppliers. And I know in a big city like London, it's difficult because you've got the sort of, M25 and then further afield, but, within that rural hinterland, just that boundary around a city, you need to reach into that and say to it, what can you give me that I don't have to travel so far for? That's important around making cities more sustainable. And then my other major contribution that I feel happy about is energy. Okay. Energy is an important factor in restaurants, and the lower requirement of energy in your kitchen, I think the more gentle you are with the food that you produce. So if you're slow cooking, if you're pickling, if you're smoking, if you're curing, if you're serving food raw, and also using a lot less fish and meat. In fact, the food project I'm on at the moment is vegetarian. Because it's all energy, the whole thing is about energy. So as a chef, I've looked at energy and reduced as much energy requirement inside my kitchens as possible. So localized food systems and lower energy consumption.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Stay with us. Don't leave. Moving on to Grace. Grace, thank you for being with us as well and being patient. I should have given you the floor earlier as well, so we have a bit of a gender balanced flow. So welcome and thank you for being with us. Could you introduce yourself briefly? And I think it might be worth combining that introduction with the nice things you're doing with your own food business, and also diving into another element of that's related actually increasingly a lot with the food sector, which is packaging. So you could share a little bit on your reusable container scheme as well with us.
Sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Grace, founder of Spicebox. Thanks so much for having me. This has been really useful. I'm learning a lot, which is great. So yeah, we're a vegan curry house based in Walthamstow. We opened about a year and a half ago. Sustainability and the food system is something I'm super passionate about. It's why I got into starting a restaurant in the first place. Predominantly, you know, we're a vegan restaurant, so everything we serve is plant-based, and that's kind of provides the foundation for us of like helping contribute towards a sustainable food system. We're not about turning the world vegan, we're just about encouraging people to eat more plant-based food and showing them how like delicious and joyful it can be to eat more veg. So yeah, so that's around kind of the our food and the fact that it's plant-based. We're also working on making as much of our menu as possible organic. So that's been a project we've been working on over the last year or so. And, you know, there's a lot of challenges as a small food business in London, trying to keep, you know, our menu at an accessible price point. It's been a really challenging project, but we're now around 50% of our menu is organic, which is fantastic. And yeah, last year we launched our reusable takeaway tiffin scheme. So as a local curry house, takeaway is a huge part of our business. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about ways that we could, you know, reduce our packaging waste and also look to more kind of sustainable alternatives to traditional takeaway packaging. And obviously us being an Indian restaurant, I've traveled in India extensively and have seen the amazing tiffin schemes working their magic in cities in India. I've actually got one here for those of you who know what a tiffin is. This is a classic Indian tiffin, and they're essentially stainless steel lunch boxes. And yeah, they're delivered around Indian cities with hot lunch for workers. And so I thought, why can't we put our food for takeaway in one of these? So essentially what happens is a guest pays £10 for a tiffin, mm-hmm. and then it's theirs to keep. And whenever they want their takeaway from Spicebox, they choose a set menu. We've got 3 set tiffin menus. They order it on our platform. They click a button to say they've already got a tiffin or whether they want to buy one. And then we fill up a tiffin with hot food for them, and they come pick up their food, and then we swap it. We swap the new tiffin full of hot food out for their tiffin that they're returning. So yeah, it's a fully reusable takeaway packaging scheme. And since we launched it, it's been unbelievably popular. Guests love it. It's a really nice thing for us and our team and the curry house as well. Obviously, we've got to know a lot of our local guests who are part of the Tiffin Club, as we call it. So yeah, it's been a really great project. And unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we had to pause it a few months ago. But I'm sure we'll come on to talk about that.
And could you share a little bit more on the positive impacts that the scheme had so far, and maybe some of the economic benefits for you for doing that?
Yeah, so from an environmental point of view, I mean, the obvious one is that it's really helping us reduce packaging waste, mm-hmm. Which has a great and positive impact on marine and soil pollution. And also another angle is around kind of customer education. So that's something that we're like really, really interested on. How can we use essentially a local curry house, that's all we are, to help kind of start to educate our customers. And with the Tiffin scheme, what I hope we're doing, and you know, it's quite evident, is that we're showing people that reusing things can be like a joy and a real fun pleasure, and it doesn't have to be a chore to kind of live this sustainable life. And I think that, you know, a lot of our Tiffin Club members are probably already taking steps to reuse, recycle, reduce, but then others are quite new to the concept and they simply like it because you know, it's a set menu, it's easy to order, there's a slight cost saving on it, the food's delivered really hot, and it's a really nice experience to eat out the tiffin at home. So yeah, that education piece is great. In terms of the carbon savings, that's something that we're still quantifying. It's quite complex, as I'm sure you're aware, but we hope to have like we hope to publish a report on that quite soon. And then from an economic point of view, like obviously at scale, there's less packaging costs. Customer loyalty has definitely been a real benefit because it's a scheme and a club. People really buy into it and they come back, and you know, they're more likely to get their takeaway from Spicebox if they already own one of our tiffins. So that's great. And then kind of as part of that as well, it's organic marketing. Like, you know, when we launched the tiffin scheme in Walthamstow, word of mouth spread super quickly. We had people walking in constantly asking about the tiffin scheme. My friend told me about it. I want to join. How do I do it? How does it work? So that's great. So yeah, it's been wholly positive.
That's really good to hear. I can see your smile, so that your smile says it all. And I'm curious on the customer experience side. So has it changed at all? So are the customers, where do they store the tiffin until they give it back? How does it work? Can you walk us a little bit briefly through that, just to see if it makes also if it's easy for the customer as well?
Yeah, sure. So if you don't have a tiffin already and you want to order a takeaway from the tiffin menu, you just you'd order either tiffin menu A, B, or C, and then you just tick a box saying, I don't have a tiffin, like I'd like to buy one. So you tick that box and you're charged £10, so one-off charge. And then you come to Spicebox and we hand over your meal, so tiffin menu A, let's say, in one of these tiffins. You walk away, carry it home, and then once it's finished, we ask guests to wash it up, and then they can leave it in their cupboards, use it for their packed lunches, store it at home, and then next time they want to take away, they just order from our menu A, B, or C, and just tick a box that says, I already have a tiffin, and then they'll come back carrying their empty tiffin with them. And then they turn up to Spicebox, say their name, we hand them over a tiffin full of hot food, and they simply give the empty tiffin back to us.
Interesting.
And then that goes back into our system.
Interesting. And how I'm conscious of time, and not timing management is not my perfect thing. So because it's so interesting and diving into all these details of the scheme, can you quickly tell us about how COVID has impacted the scheme? You briefly mentioned something, and if you are planning to expand the scheme to other areas in London as well, and how would you go about that?
Yeah, so COVID's obviously impacted us as a small hospitality business. We're actually really fortunate that we've managed to stay open throughout the whole period, just doing purely takeaway and delivery, which is fantastic. But yeah, unfortunately, you know, as soon as kind of government guidelines were announced, we took the decision to stop the tiffin scheme, mainly based on the advice that we shouldn't really be letting outside things into the restaurant. We had to be really careful about hygiene while we were operating at the height of the crisis. We definitely are planning to relaunch it soon, and that will be announced across all of our social channels. So you can follow us at Eat Spicebox on social. And in terms of expanding, so yeah, we were hoping to open a second curry house this year, and we still do plan to. So yeah, obviously the tiffin scheme will come with us then. And you know, the crisis has allowed us to test delivery. It's something I said we'd never do, but the marketplace is changing. Obviously delivery is bigger than ever. And for me, you know, a real ambition would be to launch delivery and be able to use our reusable tiffin scheme with delivery. But for that, we've got to find the right delivery partner. So if anyone is watching this webinar and knows someone or is interested in talking, then please do get in touch about that.
Cool. And I think there are some, we have some recommendations on delivery partners also in the guide, in the transportation, on the transportation chapter, that they are also local, London at least based, and they do green transport, and either by using bikes or electric vehicles. So that also could be another source. Since we are, I have you on the line, and unmuted line, there is a question from the audience, and I think we can link it to what you were sharing with us, Grace. It's Chloe. They are also trying to work on a reusable container scheme, but she's wondering how you come up against the red tape of sanitation, and what type of processes have you had to put in place to reassure governing bodies that containers are properly or officially sanitized, and that their food safety requirements are met. And I guess that will be actually relevant to the coming period after opening up, right? So thank you for the question.
We're definitely thinking about that. I mean, first of all, it goes without saying, we ask all tiffins to be returned to us clean. So there's one stage there where we'd like the customer. I mean, I don't think we've ever, I think maybe we've received one dirty tiffin back in the whole scheme. So it's returned to us already clean, and then we have to run them through our own washing in the curry house before they're returned back. But I mean, from a food hygiene standpoint, it's exactly the same process that we use to wash all of our dining plates and cutlery. So I don't see that there's not really a huge issue in terms of that, as long as they're going through the same, dishwasher that our plates and cutlery are going through, then there's not much more we can do beyond that.
Cool. And can you remind us, for the audience is asking, in what area in London are you delivering?
So we're based in Walthamstow. So we're currently delivering around Walthamstow, so Leighton, Walthamstow, North, East London. And we're also open for contact-free takeaway. So if you live outside a delivery radius, you can always jump on your bike and come and pick up a takeaway from us.
Great. Thank you so much, Grace. I think I see some quite a few questions that they are from all over the world, that maybe we can address it to the whole panel and see who wants to give it a go. I think we have Daniel from Bogota, and he says he's working very hard on being a sustainable restaurant and sourcing sustainable products. He's chef into restaurants. And they are both serving meat-based concepts, and they are trying to look for sustainable beef and pork, but it's not easy. Do you have any recommendations for Daniel, and what should he look for when sourcing his product? I don't know, Arthur, Andrew, do you want to take it? Grace, you can just wait. Yeah. Okay. Oh, are you raising your hand? There's so many things. Andrew, go ahead if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I guess in brief, we're primarily active in the UK, and we're fortunate here right now that we've got a relatively developed certification landscape for animals, and animal welfare certifications increasingly include feed and kind of environment biodiversity metrics. So depending on how developed your certification landscape is, I think like trying to choose the most highest level of certification is often a very practical way of starting. If that's not there in Colombia, then there's no sustainability without transparency. And I think knowing the farm that you're buying from would be step one, upon which you could then investigate lots of other things. And I guess in terms of how that works on the menu, some people would say that, I guess sustainable meat is a bit of a kind of challenging space. There are certainly things you can do around buying the whole carcass, building menus to use the whole animal, reducing portion size, that I'm sure Daniel's already kind of well on top of.
Mm-hmm. And I think it links to Arthur. Arthur, I was about to ask you to join us here, because you also mentioned how important it is to know where your ingredients are coming from and linking with your suppliers. Any other additional thoughts?
Hi to Daniel. I appreciate the troubles that you're going through. It's not easy when it comes to meat or fish. Fish is sometimes even more complicated. But meat is, especially when it says you work for a large restaurant group, sometimes size is an advantage, because when you approach a food system, especially like meat, and you just walk to the wholesale market and say, I want some beef and I want some pork, then it's an invisible system. You just buy the meat in front of you. But you need to go back through that system of traceability and say, well, how did that meat get here? Okay, it was through this van or through this driver or through this company. You go, great, well then what was the abattoir that was used? And therefore what was the farm that produced this meat? Because if you're big enough, you can go to that farm directly and say, look, we want to build in better working practices for our company, our companies, or our food outlets that serve meat, and build a personal relationship with your supply chain. So many of the past years and decades has been, as chefs, we would return to the wholesale market and say, we want meat, give me meat. The meat would arrive, and we had no real understanding of where it's from. It's new time now, it's a new era. And as chefs and businesses, we need to be leaning back into the production of food. Say to the producers of the beef, listen, we're focusing on sustainability. We need to be able to make sure that it's cost effective. And so Andrew's point about understanding how to use the whole carcass of an animal is vital. Because if you can use a whole carcass through your big business, you could be putting minced beef in here, you could be fillet steak in there, you could be putting tongue and brain in there, or you could be selling the hide to another company to make sustainable leather. You know, you've got lots of ways of being creative and working with sustainability better. Don't be lazy. You've got to work hard at sustainability. Find where the meat's coming from, find where your beef and pork are being produced, build relationships with good animal husbandry, and be creative with the product when it gets to you.
Very, very true. And I think this applies to also us as individuals, right? We should start caring about where our food is coming from, just not going to a supermarket buying it and not even knowing where it comes from, what's in it. I think people are starting to become more aware of that as individuals, because it's not just for the chefs, but we should all do this together. Yes, Arthur, you want to add something?
Well, just a final point to Daniel then is, if your business is that proactive around sustainability and the ethics and the holistic nature of serving meat on your menus, then your customers who are coming to you usually are too, or your customers who are looking for a new way to eat more sustainably and ethically but still have meat in their diets will turn to you. So it's a good promotional tool for PR to say, here's our supplier, here's the ingredients that go into producing our beef, this is how far it travels, this is what we do with it, and this is how we manage it, and therefore when it's on your plate it's good for you, or as good as it can be for the planet. So Daniel, be proactive and talk about it to your customers.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question, which I see that's quite interesting to address. And then we have a last poll question for our audience to wrap up, and then we're off to go. There is a question from Bryn. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing this. Any thoughts on encouraging charging or paying the appropriate prices for food upfront without outpricing lower income communities? Any thoughts on that? I'm not sure. Is that a complicated one?
I mean, it's not a particularly quick one to dive into. I think one thing that coronavirus has really shone a light on is how difficult it is to, in lots of cities around the world, to run a profitable restaurant. And it's quite a difficult thing for kind of chefs to own or voice, but there are a lot of things that take up consumer spend a lot more than the food, be that the landlord or the government or other sort of non-food aspects of the supply chain. I think what's interesting right now is the kind of creativity we're seeing in the industry around diversifying revenue. And I think that it could be that there are, much lower margin ways to connect with customers, chefs as food processors, veg box schemes, or kind of, other alternatives that allow you to kind of pay more on the food. Or I guess the customer spend, the food gets a bigger proportion of it than the traditional restaurant model. Because I guess there's, for a lot of dine-in restaurants, there's quite a lot of other things that need paying. That means actually, kind of offering high quality, local, sustainable sourcing at a low price point is super tough.
Cool. I'm so tempted to give you another question. Are you guys okay with going with one more question? They're so interesting, and we have so much interest from the audience. I just want to say that the questions we don't manage to answer now at this webinar, we will follow up with answers from the panelists and ourselves. So bear with us if we don't do them, but let's do one last one from Clementine, and she's sharing with us that she's head of a chef of a salad bar launching in October. and that she's trying, her main challenge is convincing her co-founders who don't have a background in food on the wider benefits of introducing sustainability from the supply side to serving the food. Do you have any recommendations? And I think Andrew, you have also some tools that they could help Clementine in her effort to communicate and share more on sustainability with her colleagues, right? When you're doing,
yeah, I mean, please check out the kind of Food Made Good website. There's lots of free tools and information there. Now, I think fundamentally, the good luck on opening in October, and let us know where it is. We'll come and try a salad. I think we shouldn't be seeing sustainability and business growth as things pulling two different directions. So, you know, how do we talk to those more financially minded people about the benefits? Well, I think this is a question we're all facing within our own businesses at the moment. And I guess the thing I'd like to leave you with is that the opportunity there is right now to identify what's the most sustainable dish on your menu. Read the guide, look at the principles, create a dish, ideally a whole menu, but one dish that's more waste conscious, more veg-led, more local sourcing, and then use your magic and make that the best seller. And maybe make sure it makes decent margin as well. And then you won't have too much more convincing to do.
Cool. Any other thoughts, Grace, Arthur, before we wrap up this Q&A session?
So I'm aware, Grace, would you like to say something, Grace, or shall I jump in? Okay, Clementine, well, look, head chef, you know, you're in control of all the food that's coming and going. You are the one that decides where you're buying it from and how you're preparing it and how much you're selling it for, to a degree. I appreciate you've probably got business partners. But I go back to my experience of 35 years ago when I was taught the economy of a kitchen. The economy of the kitchen is, how does your kitchen make money? And how do you build that into the training of your team? And how does your business therefore stay open and vibrant because you've got cash flow? You know, cash is the blood of your business and you need to make sure that's coming in. But managing your energy, understanding that you're not throwing anything away, lowering your chemical use, lowering your water use, making sure that you're really operating the business from an economic point of view, will begin to give you ecological outcomes because of the removal of all of the sort of lazy aspects of kitchen use. Be really resilient and work your kitchen economically. Once you begin to understand where you're making your savings, you can spend a little bit more money sometimes on your supply chain, making sure that the salads that are coming in potentially are organic or more local, or you're supporting a more localized food system. Once your business partners begin to understand that the systems that you're building in place inside the business actually work economically and ecologically, then the sustainable pattern begins to emerge. So don't be afraid of it. Be bold and be brave and manage your kitchen as best you can. And the sustainable practices should come out. And then your business partners won't need convincing because it just makes sense.
On that note, we have, I think both Clementine and Dan, they are saying many thanks for the advice. So they're all very grateful. And you don't need to, just to add on this, you don't need to do this all by yourself. I'm sure in your wider city environments, like in London, for example, we have Olio, we have Too Good To Go, we have Cup Club, we have companies that they are kind of trying to help and enable restaurants and other food businesses to close those loops. The easiest thing you can do at the end of the day, before you throw away any leftover food that hasn't been sold, is put it on Too Good To Go or on Olio in a platform and then share it with your community or your customers. Like, it just makes also financial sense. So these are quick wins you could easily apply. And we are happy to share more information on that if you want, Clementine, later. Can I look at our tech host, and can we have the last poll question, which would summarize and see how we have inspired you guys and what are your key takeaways? So which areas of the guide and from our discussion are you thinking of cracking on and doing some implementation right away? And which areas in the guide you think will be the most challenging, and which topic you would like to receive more support on from what you have heard? That would give us really a nice direction on how we can follow up with you. few calls to action. We do have, we are following up with a circular restaurant webinar workshop, a masterclass as a follow-up from the guides. So if you're interested, join us. It's going to be towards the end of July. We can share all the latest information in the chat, and stay tuned. Andrew, Arthur, Grace, any last call to actions for our audience from your side on any upcoming events that our audience should be aware of that you would like to share? Andrew?
I think I've done enough plugs already. I guess, you know, the SRA's got a lot of free resources on foodmadegood.org to help you reopen right, particularly around the new menu you're going to launch back with when you reopen. So please check those out and let us know if we can do anything that'd be more helpful.
Great.
And I'd just like to say to everyone, if you're interested in learning more about Spicebox, please do follow us on our social media channels at Eat Spicebox. We've just launched a recipe box scheme as well, which is, and yeah, it's early days, so you can check it out. Yeah, via our socials is the best place.
Great. Arthur, any last call to action? You're showing something. The chef
Manifesto. Sign up. Sign up. It's free. You don't have to do anything but read something and have a look at what sustainability means for chefs. The next Chef's Manifesto Action Day or days on the 6th and 7th of July. Jump in online, spend a couple of hours with us. It's going to be inspiration from all over the world, from Africa to Ireland and to London. We're probably going to have 60 or 70 chefs all connected in talking about sustainability and what food movement and the culture of food and how it moves around the world and how it impacts us sustainably. That's the conversation. If anybody wants to get in touch at any time to talk about sustainability, food, and what the future holds, please just get in touch. I don't know how you do it, social media, something like that. But yeah, always happy to collaborate, and good luck.
Cool. Thank you. And can we see the results of the poll, please? So food and drink is going to be the first call to action for our businesses, the businesses joining us today. Energy, water, packaging, great to see interest in most of the activities. And which areas of the guide you think will be the most challenging? Food and packaging. Feel free to reach out if the guide is not enough. As I said, we are all in this panel having a lot of resources that could help you. And circular packaging, we actually, as Advanced London, do have a support stream dedicated to packaging and how you can make that more circular. So feel free to reach out again on that. Food waste reduction, menu design. The Chef's Manifesto is a really good starting point. The Sustainable Restaurant Association, everybody has a lot of resources to help you. I don't want to drag this anymore because I realize that people might have other commitments. Thank you to the amazing panel. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for all the work you've put in the guide with us. Massive thank you to Jean, who I'm sure he's really sad that his connection didn't work, but he's the master behind the guide. He put all his energy and thought into it, and I'm really grateful for all his hard work, as well as the whole team. From us here at London, we wish you stay safe, stay healthy, and let's build back better all together. Take good care.